Why would anyone ban a motorcycle? Seriously, what could be that dangerous? Turns out, a lot. Across decades, most bikes have pushed the boundaries of speed, power, and engineering, but some crossed into danger zones leading to bans, discontinuations, or market rejections. Certain bikes ended up causing accidents, bad handling, or controversy, sometimes all at once, until the only option left was to pull them off the road. Which brings us to these 13 motorcycles whose stories reveal exactly why they disappeared. First on the list is the Kawasaki H1500 Mach 3. Riders who tried it back in the day all said the same thing. The bike felt strange the moment you rolled it out of the garage. The front felt light, the rear felt heavy, and you could tell immediately that it did not behave like anything else on the road. That feeling came from the weight distribution. About 57% of the mass sat over the rear wheel, and that imbalance turned every corner into a risk. The back end could step out without warning, sending riders into high-side crashes even when they were not pushing hard. Built from 1969 to 1975, the 500cc two-stroke triple made about 60 horsepower through a 5-speed transmission. It weighed roughly 187 kilograms and could reach around 120 miles per hour. For its era, those numbers were impressive, but the rest of the bike was not built to handle that kind of performance. The frame used thin steel tubes that flexed under load. Early models came with drum brakes that struggled even at normal speeds. At higher speeds, the bike was known for violent tank slappers, with the handlebars shaking so hard that riders were fighting just to keep the bike pointed straight. Combine that with piston seizures from detonation, and you had a motorcycle that felt like it was daring you to make a mistake. Insurance companies noticed the crash statistics and began raising premiums. Some owners were suddenly paying double or triple what they expected. At the same time, emissions rules tightened and the market shifted toward 4-stroke engines. Its reputation, rising insurance costs, and the end of the two-stroke era brought production to a stop after 6 years. It did not disappear overnight. It simply became a machine that the industry, the regulators, and the riders all moved away from. Second, Suzuki TL1000S. It was launched in 1997 with Formula One-inspired technology, specifically a rotary rear suspension damper instead of a conventional shock. On paper, it was innovative, borrowed from racing tech that was supposed to give better performance. In practice, it was a disaster. The rotary damper sat too close to the exhaust, and during hard riding, it would overheat. When that happened, the damping disappeared. The rear end would lose stability, leading to what riders called death wobble, or violent tank slappers at speed. The 996cc liquid-cooled V-twin made 125 horsepower through a 6-speed transmission, with a top speed around 165 miles per hour. Wet weight was 197 kilograms. The power delivery didn't help. It was non-linear, unpredictable, like flipping a switch mid-corner. You'd roll on the throttle expecting smooth acceleration, and instead get a sudden surge that could unsettle the bike when you were already leaned over. Crashes piled up fast. Riders were getting thrown, losing control in corners, and the stories spread through the motorcycle community like wildfire. Suzuki issued a worldwide recall to retrofit steering dampers, trying to stabilize the front end and compensate for the rear suspension issues that were causing the instability. It didn't matter. The reputation was already destroyed. Riders called it the Widowmaker, and that name stuck harder than any marketing Suzuki tried. The market rejected it completely. Production ran from 1997 to 2001, just 4 years before Suzuki pulled it. The recall couldn't save what the accidents had already killed. Coming in third, Honda ATC three-wheelers. If you grew up in the 80s, you probably knew someone who had one, or knew someone who got hurt on one. These things looked harmless, almost toy-like, but the reality behind them was a lot rougher. Honda marketed these as all-terrain cycles starting in the 70s, and they became wildly popular through the 80s. Families bought them, kids rode them, dealers couldn't keep them in stock. The ATC 250R, for example, had a 246cc two-stroke single making around 27 horsepower, 5-speed transmission with an auto clutch, weighing about 130 kilograms. Top speed around 60 miles per hour. Fun on paper, deadly in reality. The three-wheel design was inherently unstable. When you turned hard or hit uneven terrain, they'd roll over. Kids especially got hurt. Thousands of accidents reported through the decade. Broken arms, head injuries, deaths. In 1988, the Consumer Product Safety Commission stepped in with a consent decree. It required manufacturers to stop selling three-wheel ATVs immediately and buy back any unsold inventory from dealers. UPI reported this as continuing an existing ban, which wasn't quite accurate, but the effect was the same. New sales stopped cold. Later, the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act of 2008 made it federal law. You can't distribute new three-wheel ATVs in the US unless a safety standard exists, and no such standard has been created. Nobody's working on one either. Used ones still exist. You can ride them if you find one, but you can't walk into a dealership and buy a new Honda three-wheeler. The government didn't just discourage them. They shut it down completely, and the ban is still in effect today. Number 4. Suzuki TM400 Cyclone. Kickstarting this bike could break your leg, and it's not an exaggeration. The TM400 Cyclone, built from 1971 to 75, earned a reputation for violent kickback that sent riders to the hospital with broken ankles, shattered legs, fractured wrists. People dreaded firing it up. The 396cc two-stroke single made around 40 horsepower through a 5-speed transmission, lightweight at about 110 kilograms with drum brakes. The problem was the electronic ignition. It didn't advance smoothly. Instead, it jumped abruptly from mild to full advance at exactly 4,000 RPM. When that happened mid-ride, you'd get an unpredictable power surge. The bike would lurch forward. The rear end would start swapping side to side like a fish flopping on a dock. The lightweight frame couldn't handle the output. It flexed and twisted under load, making handling even worse, especially on rough terrain where you needed stability. And if you were trying to start it, the high compression ratio would send the kickstarter slamming back up into your boot with enough force to cause serious injury. Riders learned to approach it carefully, or they didn't approach it at all. Some wouldn't even try to start it themselves. Production stopped in '75 not because of a formal ban, but because people avoided buying it. The classifieds filled up with ads that said, "Injury forces sale," and that phrase became synonymous. Suzuki didn't need regulators to kill the TM400. Riders did it themselves by refusing to ride the thing, and the market spoke clearly enough that Suzuki got the message. 5th, Yamaha VMAX. The 1985 VMAX was supposed to be the ultimate power cruiser. 1,197cc liquid-cooled V4 engine, making 145 horsepower through a 5-speed transmission with shaft drive. Wet weight, 286 kilograms, top speed around 150 miles per hour. For a cruiser, those numbers were insane, the kind of power you'd expect from dedicated sport bikes. The problem was everything else couldn't keep up with the engine. Cornering was terrible. The bike behaved erratically in turns, the handling unpredictable when you leaned it over. The brakes weren't adequate for the speed it could reach. You'd be flying down a straight and realize the stopping power didn't match what you were doing. Recalls started piling up over the years. In 1985, front-wheel bearing failures that reduced control and made the bike feel unstable. 2009 brought electrical problems that caused the engine to stick at 3,000 RPM, which could be dangerous in traffic or corners. Then oil pump malfunctions from 2009 to 2011 led to stalls and potential crashes. The bike developed a cult following among riders who loved the raw power and were willing to deal with the issues, even defending it online. But the safety backlash was real. It wasn't formally banned. But the combination of dangers for inexperienced riders and the recall history contributed to its discontinuation. The later model, with a 1,679cc engine, ran until 2020, but the original's reputation stuck with it the whole time. Next up, Harley-Davidson V-Rod. You're cruising at highway speed, you squeeze the lever, and nothing happens. That's what happened to V-Rod owners with the 2008 to 2011 models equipped with ABS. The system used .4 brake fluid that absorbed water over time, and if you didn't flush it every 2 years, it would gel. When that happened, the brakes could fail suddenly. The bike also became known for death wobble at highway speeds, a violent shaking that riders struggled to control. Some cases were made worse by faulty traction control. One fatal crash led to a $287 million lawsuit over how the recall was handled and communicated. The 1,130cc liquid-cooled V-twin engine, later bumped to 1,250cc, made 120 horsepower through a 5-speed transmission with disc brakes and optional ABS. Weight around 300 kilograms, top speed about 140 miles per hour. Produced from 2001 to 2017. The problem wasn't just one thing, it was systemic. Brake fluid that required strict maintenance, or it became dangerous. Death wobble that could happen at speed without warning. Traction control issues that weren't properly addressed in recalls. The $287 million lawsuit highlighted manufacturer liability in a way that put serious scrutiny on the model. It was never formally banned, but the combination of safety issues, recalls, and legal pressure ended production. Harley didn't pull it because sales were bad. They pulled it because keeping it on the market was becoming a liability they couldn't afford. 7th, Brough Superior SS100. They called it the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles. Introduced in 1924, the Brough Superior SS100 was built for speed and prestige, a machine for wealthy riders who wanted the absolute best. 998cc, air-cooled overhead valve V-twin engine making around 50 horsepower, 3-speed gearbox, drum brakes, weighing about 170 kilograms, top speed around 100 miles per hour, which was remarkable for the 1920s. The problem was, the chassis and braking technology couldn't keep up with that performance. At high speeds, the handling became what riders described as evil, with snaky behavior on poor roads that were common in that era. The drum brakes were completely inadequate for a bike that fast. Stopping from 100 miles per hour on 1920s, brake technology was asking for trouble. In 1935, T.E. Lawrence, also known as Lawrence of Arabia, crashed fatally on one. That accident became a turning point. It prompted serious research into head injuries and helped push for mandatory helmet laws that would save countless lives later. The technology available in the 20s and 30s just hadn't caught up to the speeds this thing could reach. Production continued until World War II, when manufacturing halted completely. By then, the bike had already been outpaced by newer safety technology and better designs that learned from its mistakes. The Brough Superior became a legend, but also a cautionary tale about building machines that exceed the safety capabilities of their era. 8th on the list, Kawasaki H2 750. Stopping power equivalent to a bicycle. From 1972 to 75, this 748cc two-stroke triple delivered 74 horsepower and hit 126 miles per hour, but the braking system couldn't handle it. It had a disc brake up front and a drum in the rear, but together they couldn't stop the bike effectively at high speeds. You'd be flying and then realize you had no way to slow down properly. The frame was non-rigid, flexing and wobbling when you pushed it hard on the road. Power delivery was erratic, like a light switch that could flip at any moment without warning. You'd twist the throttle and get unpredictable surges, especially in corners where you needed smooth control the most. Weighing 206 kilograms wet with a 5-speed transmission, it should have been manageable on paper, but the combination of weak brakes, a flexy frame, and violent power made it genuinely dangerous. Production ended after 4 years. Emissions regulations were tightening across the industry, and the 1973 oil embargo made fuel-hungry two-strokes less appealing to buyers worried about gas prices. But the safety issues played a role too. Riders knew the brakes couldn't handle the speed, and the unpredictable power delivery meant you were always on edge. It wasn't formally banned by any government, but the combination of environmental regulations and its notorious reputation ended production. The bike became a symbol of an era when manufacturers built machines faster than the technology could safely support them. At number 9, Kawasaki GPZ 750 Turbo. Insurance companies blacklisted it. State Farm and others refused to cover turbo bikes, calling them too dangerous to insure at any reasonable rate. That effectively killed factory turbos in motorcycles for decades. Produced from 1984 to 85, this 738cc turbocharged inline-4 engine made around 112 horsepower through a 5-speed transmission with disc brakes. Weighed about 235 kilograms, top speed around 150 miles per hour. The problem was severe turbo lag followed by sudden power bursts that could throw riders off mid-corner. You'd be rolling through a turn, waiting for power, nothing happening, and then it would hit all at once without warning. That sudden rush could break traction when you were already leaned over. Cold starts were jerky and unpredictable, and the bike had poor idle that frustrated riders every time they fired it up. The factory ran lean fuel mixtures to meet emission standards, but that made the hesitation even worse throughout the power band. Riders complained constantly about the unpredictable nature of the power delivery. You couldn't trust it in situations where you needed smooth, predictable acceleration, like merging onto highways or navigating technical roads. After just 2 years, production stopped completely. The insurance industry had spoken clearly, and manufacturers listened to what they were saying. When insurance companies won't cover a bike at reasonable rates, it might as well be banned from the market. The market couldn't support a motorcycle that riders couldn't insure affordably or reliably. The GPZ 750 Turbo became a cautionary tale that the industry remembered for years, and factory turbo motorcycles disappeared from showrooms for decades because of the safety and insurability concerns that this bike created. Coming in at number 10, Honda CX 500 Turbo. Released in 1982 as a tech showcase with computer-controlled fuel injection, it turned into a maintenance nightmare that owners learned to hate. Common failures like stators or seals required dropping the entire engine out of the frame. That meant hours of labor and high costs for issues that should have been simple fixes you could do yourself on other bikes. Owners dreaded routine maintenance on this thing. The 497cc turbocharged liquid-cooled V-twin engine made around 82 horsepower through a 5-speed transmission with shaft drive and disc brakes, weighed about 230 kilograms. Turbo lag made the power unpredictable in real-world riding, and cold starts were jerky and frustrating every single time. The handling was spongy, lacking the feedback you needed to feel confident pushing it, and the brakes weren't adequate for what the bike could do when the turbo spooled up and you hit full power. Only 5,000 units were made before it was replaced with the 650 turbo the following year. Production stopped after just 1 year on the market. It wasn't a formal ban, but the market rejected it completely. Riders didn't want to deal with the maintenance hassles and ongoing headaches, and the performance issues made it hard to justify the premium price Honda was asking compared to conventional bikes. Honda tried to showcase innovation and push boundaries with this model, but what they delivered was a bike that cost too much to own and didn't ride well enough to make up for the downsides. The CX500 Turbo became a symbol of technology for technology's sake, without considering whether riders actually wanted or needed what they were building. 11th, Yamaha RD 500LC. Emissions regulations kept this bike out of American dealerships completely. The EPA's strict standards targeting two-stroke engines made it impossible for Yamaha to certify this bike for the US market without major redesigns that would have killed the performance that made it special, so it never got official homologation and couldn't be sold legally through dealers. The 499cc liquid-cooled two-stroke V4 engine with YPVS power valve system made 88 horsepower at 9,500 RPM through a 6-speed cassette-style transmission. Twin front disc brakes with 4 piston calipers and a single rear disc. Dry weight around 205 kilograms. Top speed approximately 140 miles per hour. Produced from 1984 to 86 as a road-going replica of Yamaha's YZR 500 Grand Prix racer, inspired by Kenny Roberts' championship success in the early 80s. It featured a unique 50-degree twin crankshaft V4 layout that worked like two geared 180-degree parallel twins for smoother power delivery compared to other two-strokes. In other markets like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, it sold as the RZ500 with Yokohama tires and specific paint schemes that varied by region. Japan got a detuned RZV500R version with a lighter aluminum frame, reducing weight by about 20 kilograms, and power restricted to around 64 horsepower to meet local regulations that limited motorcycle output. Only gray market imports reached the US, often at high cost and without factory support or parts availability from official channels. The bike became a highly sought-after collector's item because of its rarity, raw two-stroke performance that modern bikes can't replicate, and nostalgic connection to the 80s GP racing era. Production totaled around 10,000 units globally, before tightening emission standards ended it. At number 12, Meiko Enduro 685. Its power-to-weight ratio made it one of the rawest two-strokes of its era, and controlling it required real skill. It ran a 684cc liquid-cooled two-stroke single that produced around 82 horsepower at 7,000 RPM and roughly 60 foot-pounds of torque. With a dry weight just over 100 kilograms, that power-to-weight ratio turned it into a machine that felt more like a competition weapon than a trail bike. It used a 5-speed transmission with a wet multi-plate clutch, WP 48mm forks, an adjustable rear shock, and Brembo disc brakes front and rear. Meiko, a German manufacturer founded in 1926, returned to large displacement two-strokes in the early 2000s under Koestler ownership. The 685 came from the earlier 620 platform used in European enduro and supermoto racing, designed to deliver more top-end power for competitive events. It absolutely delivered, but the cost was rideability. The power band was notoriously narrow. Riders said the bike felt calm one moment and explosive the next, especially in low gears. One small twist of the throttle could launch the front wheel or send the rear spinning on loose terrain. The high compression ratio, around 12:1, made starting the bike risky. Kickback became legendary, and mistiming a kick could result in broken ankles, wrists, or worse. The 685 demanded full concentration from expert-level riders. Sudden power surges, minimal engine braking, and constant wheel spin made it a thrilling but unforgiving machine. By 2014, Maiko shifted focus to competition-only models, and the 685 disappeared from the lineup. Used examples now sell for $5,000 to $8,000. Last on the list, Buell RS 1200. Harley-Davidson shut down the entire Buell brand on October 30, 2009. They called it a mercy killing, and looking back at bikes like the RS 1200, you can see why. This was Eric Buell's first street-legal production motorcycle, built from 1989 to 93 after he left Harley as an engineer and road racer to start his own company. The 1,198cc air-cooled 45-degree V-twin engine, sourced from Harley-Davidson Sportster, made 61 horsepower at 5,000 RPM through a 5-speed transmission, weighed around 200 kilograms with a short wheelbase designed for cornering agility. It excelled in corners but suffered instability at highway speeds, often exhibiting weaving or headshake above 80 miles per hour from frame flex and inadequate damping. The underdamped rear suspension led to pogoing over bumps, causing loss of traction. Severe engine vibrations numbed riders' hands and feet on longer rides. Excessive front-end dive under hard-braking compromised control, and the clunky transmission with notchy shifts frustrated precise gear changes. Only around 300 units were made before production ended in '93 due to high costs, around $9,000 retail and niche appeal. Harley acquired 49% of Buell that same year, eventually owning it fully by 2003, but shut it down completely during the economic recession to focus on core Harley products. The RS 1200 became a collector's item for its rarity and historical significance as an early American sport bike attempt, but the problems it had foreshadowed bigger issues that Buell never fully solved. That wraps up this list, and I'm curious what you think about it. If you've ever ridden one, seen one, or have a story about it, drop it in the comments because these bikes always come with wild experiences. Some of you grew up around them, others only heard the reputation, so I want to hear your side of it. Let me know which ones you agree with or which ones you think I missed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.